Yeah, today I want to talk about, the title is City on a Hill. Just basically, just to give you an idea, just going on the idea of evangelism. Okay, I think we all know we need to share the gospel, but put a little twist into this evangelism that might be a little helpful. I realize it's not easy to evangelize sometimes, just to go out and just talk to people about Jesus, and that's what we need to do in the overall scheme. But just a couple of little things to kind of encourage us that it's not as hard as we think it is. But just on this, in verse 14, it talks about this cities that's set on a hill that cannot be hidden, and it's just basically talking about the city with huge lights. I remember, like, right after graduating college, there's a bunch of friends of mine. We had graduated, we started making some money, and like, hey, let's do something fun. It was like our college celebration trip. So, it's a bunch of guys. We was hanging out, talking, and said, hey, let's go to Vegas. One guy was like, hey, back then, I don't know how it feels now, but it was like a cool place to go, buffets, lights, things to do. And so we all decided for a couple months, we saved some money, and we went for like a couple of days. It's like a weekend and a little bit more. And it was interesting. It's the first time I ever really traveled like that. But like we're like young guys, excited. We're like, see the big lights and what's up with Vegas. And it is a very interesting city. So I remember we were just flying in. It was a late night flight or a later flight, and it was like pitch dark, and you could literally see the city from the airplane. Like, we were up pretty high, and you could just see it. It's like the only thing. It's like completely dark, and you just see this bunch of lights. And it was interesting. We had a great time. There's some things I would say that, hey, don't do it, and not really bad stuff, but it's something that we went and had some fun and ate and did some gambling a little bit, sightseeing, and just act silly, and so it was really interesting. But the interesting fact about Vegas is that it's not like someone from Vegas said, hey, come to Vegas. It's like it just automatically is advertised. Like, you just know that about Vegas, because of things that you've heard. It's not like people inquire about it, but if you just, there's a lot of information that's just coming out. It's got a lot of lights. There's gambling, there's buffets and other things. But not only that, but I realize, like, it's like a place to go. Like, they're not saying, Vegas is not saying, come here. Everyone come. I mean, they kind of are, but not directly, right? They don't have representatives from Vegas saying, hey, why don't you come and check it out? But I was doing some research, and it said this, that Vegas is the brightest place on the earth at night. Is the brightest place. So the astronauts, they're looking down. They said it is the brightest place. And this year they said that they're gonna the next NHL team, hockey team, national hockey team is gonna be in Vegas. They're gonna have I thought that's kind of interesting. That it's one of the hottest places, but they'll have a hockey team, and not only that, but the Los Angeles Raiders, the Oakland Raiders, are thinking about having a football team there. So it's not just people want to go there, but even teams and things just kind of are drawn to Vegas, whatever reason it may be. And I want to kind of talk about our Christian faith in that way, that one source of evangelism is not that we always have to go out. We need to go out and share, but also people are drawn to us, like we see with this salt and light. But just going on in this first verse, it says, you are the salt of the earth, and if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. And here it talks about salt of the earth, and I'm not going to go into detail of the importance or the characteristics of salt, but salt is used for like flavoring food, as it says, if salt has lost its taste, so it's for seasoning, But not only that, but it's used to, back then, they didn't have refrigerators, so they'll use salt to preserve their food, They'll preserve food that way with salting the food. And not only that, it was also used for like healing. They'll use it for healing purposes. But I'm not going to go into details of that part. But it's interesting here. It says this, if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. It's interesting here. It's saying this, that salt will lose, it can lose its salty taste. So in there they had salt that would lose its, the salty properties, and they would literally throw it on the road. And I was thinking, like, how is that possible? How is that possible? I mean, the salt that we use here, if once, you use salt, it's like completely gone, right? Like the table salt or rock salt or sea salt. But the salt in these biblical times was a different kind of salt. It was processed differently, and it's a different salt. It wasn't pure like the salt that we have here that we use or we buy at the store. It was a very impure product. And so basically the way that they got salt was from the ocean and also the Dead Sea close by. And basically is that what they would do is they'll make a big hole, and they'll get the salt water and put it in the hole. They'll pour this water in a pit, and they'll just let the water, because it's so hot in the area, so the heat and the sun would evaporate the salt water in this pit, and what you have left behind is salt. And that's how they would have salt. And the best salt that you could possibly get in that area was from the Dead Sea, which had the highest salt content, not only in that area, but in the whole entire world. And so here, that's the way that they made salt. But the thing is, even with the Dead Sea, it's at, even like the ocean salt, if you've been in the ocean, it's like really salty. But it's amazing that the percentage of salt in the ocean water is only 4%. 4% of it is the salt. And then in the Dead Sea, which is the most saltiest place, is 30% sodium chloride. So you have a much higher content, but it's only still 30%. And so what would happen is that people would use this salt, the salt in that whatever's left behind, the form of salt, it's only at best is 30%. 30% of that material is salt. So it could get used up, and the rest of that 70% will be a useless material. And so this is what Jesus is saying, that salt would lose its saltiness because of the way that it was processed. And so we see here, Christ is saying, hey, the purpose of salt is to be salty. But when it's not used anymore, they would just throw it away, and it would be part of the street or whatever. Secondly, they talked about this light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand. It gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. And here we see this two ways of being the light of the world. One is a city on a hill, and then this lamp that is put on a stand of some sort. In this time, if we look at a city set on a hill, it's obvious like cities should be on higher elevation. But in those times, all the cities were built on some kind of a mound. They were never, they're built on higher elevation. And the main purpose was that not so that it could light and see other people, but the main point, it was a very strategic position for a city to be there. One is it could see invaders coming from farther away. If people were to come and attack, right, it was a natural defense, because if people had to go up to the city, it's easier for them to defend the city. But that also naturally allowed the city at night to be lit better. And so people from distance would say, hey, there's a city over there, and it's easy to find it and get to the city. And we see the same thing here with a light, with a lamp being on a stand, that it drew people to it. It allowed people to see what's around that. I went to a conference last year, a building conference in Maryland, and they were actually tackling the issue of how do we grow the housing market here in the Maryland, D.C. area, Virginia area. How do we grow it? And it's interesting here, if you're planning to move, or if you're looking, it's really changing a lot in this area. Like housing, now houses have become smaller. You're going to see more like townhouses, condos, apartment buildings. So in a smaller, tighter space, you'll see a lot more units. But what they're saying is that they're trying to get people, they're saying people are coming into the area, and all these builders are trying to get them to buy their house. And so if you realize this, you see a lot of this concept, like these town centers coming up, like Fairfax Corner, out in Maryland, there's Clarksburg Town Center, Woodmore Town Center in Prince George's County, Townsend Town Center over in Townsend, Maryland, Gaithersburg, there's Crown Farm, even in Ashburn, there's one Loudon, and there's housing going booming in that area, and the crazy part is people are buying it. And the reason is this: now people are looking for places, right, that they can socialize, they can walk to, they can go to stores. So we see here the same concept in the biblical times as the same thing, is that people would be drawn to the city because of the lights, because of the social environment. And we see them drawing into these cities, just as the concept now with these town centers that we see here. And we see same thing with the light, with the lamp on the stand, that people gather around that lamp, as it shines light. One of the things I realize, I yell at my kids all the time for not shutting the door. They leave the door wide open, and I'm telling you, you leave the door wide open, bugs are going to come in. And they go like, what bugs, right? So at night, when we turn on the light, I mean, there's like all these flying insects all over my lights. It's like, these are the bugs that you let in the house that you did not see, you know? And we see even like bugs drawn towards the light, right? So just going on this about evangelism and city, just being the salt of the earth, light of the world, is point one is this. There's as Jesus talks about this passage, there's similarities, right? There's similarities between salt of the earth, light of the world. What are those similarities? One is this, that they're very important. Salt and light are very important in life. It's important. It's a very important thing that we need. One is this, the concept of salt is this, is that salt is not only important for life, but it's important for our bodies. Without salt, the human body cannot survive. That it keeps the body balanced and moving, that we need salt. You know, as we sweat and lose the salt, we need to replenish it. Our body cannot, produce salt. So we need that salt to come into our bodies. And we see the importance of salt, but also there's the importance of light. Is that we need light to function, to work. Could you imagine a life without any light? You know, that there's nothing you could do almost. A second thing about salt and light that is very similar is that they make things better. They make things better. You know, it's not, they make things that we already have better. We see here with the light on the lampstand is that it makes life better for the person in the house because they're able to see, they're able to do things, right? It says, verse 15, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. It is this, that this light, right, it makes life better, right? It makes life better. Not only that, but salt also makes life better. It makes things better. I didn't realize this with salt, but actually salt can make food taste sweeter. I was like, how does that work? You know, how does salt make food taste sweeter? And one of the things is I've heard that if you put salt on watermelon, the watermelon tastes sweeter. I was like, how does that work? And I tried it, and it actually does taste sweeter. Anything that salt makes things taste sweet. Without salt, your baking goods do not taste very good. One of the things is, last week I bought this. I like trying out new things. So I got this Thomas English muffin, and they had a new flavor. It was called salted caramel. Salted caramel. And I was like, that's weird. And I don't want something salty and sweet. And I was eating this, and I was like, it was really sweet. I didn't taste the salt, but I realized like the flavor of salted caramel is pretty popular, and it's very sweet because the salt in the caramel makes it much sweeter. But no one ever says, wow, this, oh, wow, it's the salt that's doing this. No, they never think about that. Makes things, better. The third point is that salt and light give attention outside themselves. It's not about them. The focus is never on the salt or light, if you realize that. One is this with light. No one ever walks into a room and say, wow, the lights are cool. Unless it's like a Christmas tree, no one ever compliments the light. No one ever, it's what the light does, right? It's how the light makes things better. But the attention and focus is never on the light itself, just like salt. The focus is never on wow, when you eat something, you're not like, wow, this salt is so cool. Wow, I love this. No, it's really just the food is so good. And it gives the attention and support to the food. So we see the similarity of salt and light, right? That one is important. Two, it makes things better, and mostly the focus is outside of themselves. Is how is Christ the salt and light? How is he the salt of the earth, light of the world? One is this, we see that he's the salt of the earth, meaning this, is that we talked about the purity of salt, is that Christ is the purest of all salts. He is the purest, right? Just like unlike the salt that is created in the biblical times, where it's at most 30%, that Christ is 100% pure. That he is the salt of the earth. Not a salt of the earth, but that he is the salt of the earth. That he never loses flavor, right? He always makes things great. He preserves life, he heals life, and he brings flavor to life. Secondly, he's a light of the world, right? This is what it says, John 8:12. It says, again, Jesus spoke to him, saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Is that Christ is the ultimate guide of life. Just as these cities give light, and the lamp gives light to give guidance, right? To show people the way that Christ is the ultimate. That when we follow Christ's light, right, that is life. You know, I went to missions at one of my previous church. One of the things they did, they were supporting a missionary in Kenya, Africa, a Korean lady, and you know, we went to visit her, and it was my first time in Africa. It was a very, I was so blessed. I was very, it was the first time. It was very unique. It was a lot of work, all the shots and stuff and preparation. It was very expensive. We went to visit her, and she was doing great things over in Africa. I mean, I found out in Kenya, she told me there's like 150 missionaries like in Kenya, and she was one of the 150 missionaries, Korean missionaries, just Korean missionaries. So we went and she, you know, she was when we got there to her house, she was supporting 10 kids. She had adopted 10 kids to send them to school. So it's not like adopt, but she had adopted them just for the school year so they can go to school and get an education. So she had 10 kids, and she said she'd raise support, $50 for one child a month to go to school, private school, with clothing, food, books, housing, everything. And so she had these 10 kids, and I got to know them, and she had trained 3 native pastors. So 3 of them were 3 pastors, and they were in their own villages, and they had their own church. And she would like support them financially and prayer and resource. They'll meet together, and basically she was kind of like a church planner of the area. And not only that, she actually even at the time that we were there, she even started like an orphanage. There were a couple of like little babies. They were like 6 months old that had been abandoned, and she had started an orphanage house. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I just asked her about her story, like, how did you get here? How did God call you? And she said at the time that she was planning to go to Kenya, it was a very difficult time in Kenya. There was a lot of violence, instability, and the churches in Korea said, we don't want to send you there. It's dangerous. It's dangerous. Are you sure you want to go to Kenya? He's like, well, God has called me to go to Kenya. I want to go to Kenya. And the church is like, we advise that you do not go because it's a very dangerous time. You as a Korean American female is going to have we're worried about your safety by going there. And then she told me this. She said what convicted her and what allowed these churches to support her. She said this, is that she said, the most safest place I could be in the world in my life is when I'm in the hands of God. And if God is sending me to Kenya, then that is the most safest place I could be, no matter how difficult it is. And so we see here that Christ is the light of the world. He's the light of our life, that wherever Christ sends us, is that is the best and most safest and most joyous place to be. And her ministry is striving. At the time I went there, I just want to share another story, is that her daughter was a gospel singer in Kenya. And she was like, she had her little, music screen name, Silk. And she was like the top, like, 3rd most popular Christian, and not just Christian, but just, music artist in Kenya. And then people knew her and all this. So we see, that Christ is the light of the world. So what's the instructions to us, right? What's the instruction to us? But before I get into that, it's interesting here that Jesus, when he's talking about this passage here about salt of the earth, light of the world, it's a very interesting time, is that Matthew chapter 5 is about the Beatitudes. And you probably read the Beatitudes. The first part, it talks about how it says this in verse 2, verse 12. Let me just read the Beatitudes for you. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecute the prophets who were before you. And so the last part is just I want to kind of encourage us, how do we evangelize? How do we share Christ? Is not only is it difficult for us now, but it was difficult for them back then. So when Jesus tells them to be the salt of the earth, light of the world, he's saying, be the Christians, be the followers of Christ that I've called you to be. But that's not that's a one point. But another thing is that they were in difficult times, like I shared last week. It was very difficult for the Israelites because they were under Roman rule, right? They were being taxed. They were in a land that was not their land. They were living in their land, not by their rules, by the rules of the Roman Empire. And they had no right or no privilege to decide what kind of rules that they would be. And Christ says here, is you still be the faithful Christians that you're called to be. And it's kind of tough, isn't it? Like, when everything's against you, right? And I think a lot of times we feel that way. It's like, what's the use of sharing the gospel if everyone is so against Christian? Best thing is, like, we just will do our own thing and just keep to ourselves. And Jesus is saying, don't keep to yourselves. Shine. Be salty. Shine. And God will see you, and God will bless you, and people will see that and be blessed. So I want to encourage us that maybe we're in an environment where, like, maybe you feel like, hey, like, you are, like, outnumbered where you live, where you work. But I want to encourage us that hey, there are things that we can do, even though we're outnumbered, that we could be the salt of the earth, light of the world, and make an impact in our community and in those around us. One is the first thing is, yes, we need to share the gospel with our mouth. I think that's the given. I'm not going to go into details with that, but we need to share it, But I'm not going to say that's the first thing that we should always do. I think one of the things that the more important thing is that we need to be faithful. We need to be faithful. Just as Jesus says, hey, you be the salt of the earth, be salty. If you're salt, you need to be salty. If you're light, you need to shine. As Christians, be Christians. Be Christians. There's a story about Alexander the great conqueror, that he was going through his army, and he was like looking at his army and just like marveling at them, go to his soldiers and ask them who they are and just kind of get to know who they are. And there was one story that he was walking through his army, and he saw this one soldier, and he asked the soldier, what is your name, soldier? And the soldier goes, Alexander. And the soldier was really young, he was weak, he looked timid, he didn't look like a soldier, he looked very weak and not confident and puny. And I guess that's why Alexander picked him. And he goes to the soldier and says, you know that your name is a great name. Alexander is a great name. And he's implying is this, that you and I have the same name. Alexander the Great, telling the soldier, you and I have the same name. And he says this, he says, soldier, you have a choice. Either you change your name or you be great. Change your name or be great. And as Christians, if we bear the name of Christ, if we call ourselves Christians, I think that's something we have to decide, right? Either we change our Christian name or not be followers of Christ, or that we need to be faithful and represent our name. Just as this year we have the Olympics, and it's crazy. I was listening to the Olympics, and I think this is the first time I've ever heard people saying negative things about the Olympics. Not only negative things, it was a shocker to me that how people didn't, in their country, they didn't want to be part of the Olympics because how Rio is dangerous. They're talking about the water is so dirty that people are going to get sick. They're worried about Zika. They're saying they don't have enough law enforcement because there's so crime that if you have anything of value that you would get robbed, they're saying, and they don't have the law enforcement or military to protect them. But majority of times with the Olympics, it is such an honor and a pride to represent your country in the Olympics, But now we see that, and as Christians, we are called to represent Christ. Is this, that we just have to be faithful and live the life. Secondly is that that our actions matter, even the littlest of actions. We see salt is a very little thing, but it makes a big impact in our life, in our food. We see light, very insignificant thing at times, but it makes a very big impact. And one of the things I want to encourage you is this, for us to be salt of the earth, light of the world. It's like that everything we do, even the littlest things, right, it does matter. And it makes a difference, and it's very, very important that every little thing makes an impact and makes a difference. You know, my wife and I, when we first got married and we had our little one, her best friend had come to visit us, and we were supposed to pick her at Reagan Airport. And in Shirlington, my wife likes this little cute little wine shop. It's called Curious Grapes. It's no longer there anymore. But so I was like, hey, your friend's coming. Let's go over there and buy this bottle of wine that she likes. It's an African sparkling wine that they only sell. So we decided to drive over there and then pick up a friend and do all that stuff. So we went over there, and we picked up this wine, and then we had a really late lunch because we had to do a lot of errands getting ready for a friend to come. And we got into the restaurant, and it was like 2:30. Her friend wasn't going to come in until like 4 or 5 o'clock. And so we got in the restaurant. We were eating. It was just me, my wife, and Miles, who was little at the time. And you know, we're like, my wife's like, this is a good time to eat because, you know, we'll eat really fast. No one's in the restaurant. They'll cook our food fast, and then we can just go. So we went there, and I saw this one lady, and she was just sitting by herself, you know. And then she had just come in and sit by herself. And it was just us and them. And I looked at and I was like, my wife looked at me. I looked at her, and she looked at me and was like, don't even think about it, honey. We got things to do, right? So I said, Miss, hey, you want to have lunch with us? You know, and then I'm thinking like, okay, she's not gonna eat lunch with us. We have a baby, right? I just felt convicted to do it. She's like, sure. And my wife gives me this dirty look, like, we have things to do. You know, we can't be sitting here, and I've got a baby, and so we're sitting there eating lunch, and she's just like talking like up a storm, right? She's like, am I talking to her? I was like, no, just go and keep talking, and food hasn't come yet. And she's telling me about her story, how like she comes to this restaurant, and she volunteers at the Smithsonian, and all of these things, and at the end, she realized she was talking so much. She's like, oh, by the way, let me know about you guys. You know, what's going on? So I told her, yeah, we're here doing errands, and we're getting this wine, and we're going to pick up our friend. And then she was like, what do you do? And at the time, I was serving in church. She's like, well, I'm a pastor. And she goes, I so knew you were a Christian. And then we started talking about church, about God. She didn't become a Christian, but she was like, I knew you were a Christian. And then my wife is like, then she's like, yeah, you know, like, we encourage this person and bless them. And I told her, you should try to go to church, and, you know, it'd be good for you. And that even the littlest things, the simple meal like that, had encouraged this person, you know, to think about God a little bit. And I want to encourage us, too, that even the littlest things that we may think, it may not matter. Maybe that prayer, maybe that letter, you know, maybe that act of kindness that maybe no one will see but you and God will make a difference. Even the littlest things will make a difference. Thirdly is that we need to understand our position. We need to understand our position. Is that he said, you're the salt of the earth, light of the world. That this light, as a light, you need to understand your position. He said the lamp needs to be put up on a stand, right? Not under a basket. Salt needs to be used. And I think in some sense is this, that we too need to understand our position, right? That where we are, God has placed us there. Maybe to be that light, or maybe to be that salt to give flavor to someone's life. He says, do you understand where you're at? Where you live? Where you work? The people that you encounter? The church that you attend? The friends that you meet? That it's not a coincidence that this sovereign God had placed us in a position to be the salt of the earth, light of the world. I want to kind of share the story. I led a mission trip to Guatemala with some youth students, and they were like so excited. Like half the kids have never been on a plane, and those same half have never ever used a passport in their life. So they're like, I mean, the kids were so excited. I don't know if they're excited to go share the gospel or get on an airplane to go to another country, and they're like, most of them were excited to go to another country and see the world, right? Because all they've seen is, what they in this. So we got there. When we got there, the kids were excited. They're showing off their stamp, the passport stamp that they do, and they're like all excited, and it's like adventure for them, And but as we got there, like we were ministering to a lot of kids, like little kids, and like VBS, like elementary school kids, and they were just the students were just loving them, like hugging them, and I mean, they're pretty dirty, this bare feet, and they're not always washing their hands, no sanitizer. I'm like thinking like, okay, you kids go, and I'm not touching any of you guys, and but they're just loving them, getting dirty and hugging them, running around, and it was a blessing to see. So at the end of the trip, I was talking to them and just encourage, I was like, hey, what did you learn? And they're like crying, like, oh, we want to stay, and we love them. And I'm like, we gotta go, we gotta go home. And then we got there, and I sat them, and I was like, and I asked them, did you know that in your school that there are a lot of Guatemalan kids from Guatemala, just from a town like this? How do you love them? Do you even say hi to them? How come you've never invited any of them to church or King's Dominion trip or lock-in? And one kid said, well, they're different. I was like, what's different? They live in the U.S., they live in Guatemala. And I challenged them. I was like, look, maybe God has sent you here to love the Hispanic community in your schools, which there are a lot of them. Is this, that we really need to open our eyes and see that God has placed us to do ministry all around. And that's why Jesus says here, it says this, in the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. That is not about us. That it is about God. It is amazing love for all. So we need to be aware of where we are. I want to close with this, the story of Mother Teresa. She's one of the Christian figures, evangelists, and humanitarian or mercy person that I've read about. It's amazing. The story of Mother Teresa is that she actually grew up in a very wealthy home. Her father was a merchant. Her mom was a stay-at-home mom. And she lived with a lot of money, to the point where her and her mom would go and help the community by giving food and encouraging them because of the wealth that her father had. But at a young age, she had decided to join the convent and be a nun. And it's interesting here is that not only did she come from a pretty well-off family, but she had chose to go to Calcutta, India, the worst place that you could possibly go in the world, where the death rate was like you're guaranteed to die. One of the things, the thing is, not only was it poor and just really people were dying, but one of the biggest things is there was a disease called leprosy, which is very contagious. And what happens is with leprosy is that your nerves will stop working and limbs would start coming off. And there was no really known cure for it. And what she felt she was called to go there, and she'd serve these people with her life, that she could get leprosy. She would see people die left and right in the most poorest of all areas. But I think many of us know how amazing this woman is, that for the calling of Christ to go there and make a huge impact in the worst place, that she is considered one of the greatest missionary, evangelist, humanitarian ever. And I think is that God is not calling us all to be like Mother Teresa, but I think one thing God is calling us is that us to be faithful. We're not here to just always share the gospel. One is just to be faithful. Do the little things and frequently. And lastly is know our position, where we are, that God has placed us there. Let's pray together.